Hello, welcome to Dissident Canada. My name is Tyler. Today I thought I'd talk about the national debt issue in a general sense, but also talk about it in the context of Canada and the United States and how you actually feasibly deal with it. Um, it's more complicated than the libertarians seem to think of. Hey, just cut government. You know, that would work if you could ensure that you would stay in office for 20 or more years. Like, specifically in the context of the United States, you've got right now, you're on pace by, like, I think the end of the year to be extremely close to $40 trillion in debt. Like, it'll be so close that like you just say almost 40 trillion. Like you could say 40 and I would be like, yeah, okay, I'll give it to you. Um like it's such an astronomically large amount of money, all right? And you've got what? It's yearly interest payments of what is it? $1 trillion. So let's say the United States brings in $3 trillion and you need to and you cut it down the federal expenditure down to $1 trillion, all right? So you're paying $2 trillion. Half of that is just interest, and then the other half is going down to pay the principal. And that's you know fine. If you pay down the principal, you've got 40 years of paying it down. I mean, although as you pay down the principal, you're paying less and less interest, so more and more. So it's not going to be 40 years. It'd probably be closer to say 25 or so. But that's assuming that you don't have any issues that you need to spend money on. Like if you allocate 100% of that $1 trillion, or yeah, 100% of the 1 trillion that you're using to operate the government, and then 100% of the 2 trillion that you are then using to pay down the deficit. Well, what happens if you have a national emergency in which you need to spend money? And I'm not just saying in the context of a financial crisis. There are things you can do in a financial crisis that isn't a big waste of money, but like think about, say, a natural disaster of some kind. You say, oh, sure, put it on the states. Yeah, the states that have the same deficit problems that the feds have. And some states don't have enough income to overcome that. So think about, poor states like Mississippi. What happens if you get, a hurricane that instead of hitting Florida just devastates Mississippi? It's not completely unheard of. So, like, you get into situations where that's really not exactly feasible. And the other side that people really don't talk about in the case of the national debt in the United States, all right, is that almost $40 trillion in debt is the entire base layer for the euro dollar system. The euro dollar system, I always have to come back to this because not many people know about it. This is dollar denominated debt that originates outside of the United States. So non-US banks basically lending dollars into existence on their ledgers. Yes, it is completely legal. Well, not completely. It's a gray zone. Is it technically money laundering? Not money laundering. Counterfeiting? Yes. Because it's outside of US jurisdiction. But because it's outside of US jurisdiction, nobody can actually deal with it. So all of that debt is backed up by rehypothecated U.S. debt. So the bond market is, like say the T-bills. All right, they are used not just once, but multiple times, up to around 20 times. Okay, so as the base layer, the U.S. debt decreases, the amount of rehypothecation has to increases. So now you've got, instead of 20 leveraged plays on one piece of debt, you could have quite easily 40 or 60 relatively quickly on the debt that's there. So, if you know anything about what happened in 2008 and leverage, you know you're just setting up a financial catastrophe to happen. And that's the real predicament for the Americans, because the euro dollar is the medium of exchange for the world. Like, just a case in point, if you are doing currency swaps, all right, and it's not a physical currency, if you are changing a Canadian dollar into Thai baht, for example, all right, what is happening behind the scenes is you are taking Canadian dollars, buying US dollars, and then using those US dollars to buy the Thai baht. That is what is, in essence, happening in the background. Okay? There's multiple layers of bullshit behind the scenes, but that's what happens. So you end up into a situation with dollar debt going down, or American dollar debt going down, US debt. That system would have to change. And see, the problem is the Eurodollar system's been around for, it's like 75 years now. Almost. Like, so if there was an alternative to the system that worked not just the same but better, gave more functionality, it would have swapped over, because it is an inherently inefficient system. But it is better than the alternatives, and it allows for rapid growth and acceleration of wealth to a certain degree. So for the US debt, you have to consider that. But if you're a, say, more, let's not say isolationist, but non-interventionalist, you don't really care about the rest of the world and the problems that create, because it's their problems. You want to deal with making your citizens better off than they are now. Donald Trump is going about that process better than most presidents. Okay? What you have to do, all right, when you're in such a large debt load compared to GDP, is you can't just cut your way out, because you need to have successive administrations continue on what you're doing. And what'll happen if you just cut is, if you cut too much, too fast, the voters will reject you, and they will go someone on to who will spend more than you ever thought possible. That's just how politics works. You're going to get that kickback. So, the best way forward, right, and this goes for Canada too, all right, is to cut where you can. So, in the context of the United States, USAID, which is just a massive money laundering operation, that helps facilitate the Eurodollar system, because it allows actual real dollars that can't be destroyed to be distributed around the world. But it also facilitates a whole host of grift of billionaires doing, globalist things and getting the U.S. taxpayer to pay for it while making money off of it. Bill Gates is infamous for doing this shit. He will invest money in, say, a pharma company, and then use the funds he gets from his various charities that he runs and invest in that company, and his personal wealth will explode. He also does that with, like, he'll have his charities buy that stock and then they'll invest into it, or another charity will. Like, it's a massive grift. Canada has, what do we have? Is it's Global Affairs Canada does a very similar operation. People are breaking it down on. So if you cut stuff like that, all right, which does harm the country that is forking out the money, all right, no ifs, ands, or buts. You cut spending to post-secondary schools, universities, colleges. You cut that, like, right out. Um, you'll get better educated students, so you'll get better educated adults, which is great. Um, you can also do things like, Jesus, what is it called? Student choice, where the tax dollars for a child that is assigned to them by law does not go to just the public system. It follows where the kid is. So if the kid goes to a private school, their tax dollars that are allocated to them help pay for that private school. It can be allocated for homeschooling, so on and so forth, and all varieties of that. What that does is it gets parents, gives them choice, which then makes a more competitive market for the education of children. You get better educated children, they're smarter, they make more money. It's very simple how that works. Like, those are all great ideas, and that's long term. How do you do that with the debt? You cut the things you can, and then you make growth plans. Sometimes you have to invest. I made a video about like, specifically for Canada, because our resource sector is so underdeveloped, and the infrastructure of transporting those resources is so underdeveloped, because our just infrastructure is underdeveloped in general. The government would have to spend money on those infrastructure projects, but you could, at a certain point, open it up and say, hey, we're going to allow companies to build these infrastructure projects as well, as long as they don't mind being regulated like a utility, which means they have to be neutral to all parties. They can't just say, well, I own it, I don't like you, fuck you. You can't use this. So it's kind of why I'm somewhat okay with the general plan of what I see Carney doing with Bill C5, and I've gone over that in a video, where Carney's going to use the NATO 5% and Bill C5 to develop the infrastructure and resources of Canada, which will hopefully lift people up the wealth gap, which is it's great if it happens. Like, if you do that and you reduce spending and you do you'd have to cut taxes across the board. You'd have to get rid of all the stupid shit, not just the carbon tax. You'd have to deregulate supply management and all that crap and all that I want to say monopoly style business, even though it's not technically a monopoly. There's multiple big companies, so it's a pluropoly. But, basically the big guys are the only ones who can compete. You deregulate that, you bring all prices down, you do what Trump does, and I would do it smarter than what Trump does, but with tariffs, you make it hurt just enough. You increase tax revenue by that way. You encourage, especially with deregulation, you encourage the business sector to build in Canada, which is fantastic. You want about 25% of your economy to be about manufacturing, like not like resource refinement, like I would put that in a different thing, like actual manufacturing of goods, like the finishing of goods, like say building bicycles, not just hey we'll make steel. You want actual manufacturing um, of products that will then be shipped to stores. See where my tariff policy would differ is I would have an extremely low tariff with the United States, not for that would exclude goods that are shipped to the United States and then um, shipped into Canada and sold in Canada. That's different. But primary manufactured goods in the United States, I would have a low tariff rate there, like say 2 to 3%, maybe 5% at the high end. Because you get a percentage, because like people don't understand with the sale of goods, there is a maximum price you can sell something for. Okay. Um, Typically, you sell it at that high price to keep your margin as high as possible, so that you're making bank. Or if costs go up, you don't immediately have to cut and all those things. But also, you need a high amount of cash flow because the business world runs on debt, and you need cash flow to keep that paid down. I wish there was other ways to do that, but it's not feasible in the modern era. And it's just not. So, like, you have to have this balanced approach to dealing with national debt. Now, see, in Canada, it's much different because our national debt is significantly lower, and we have such undeveloped sectors and such high government bureaucracy, yada, 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 all that other stuff that libertarians are absolutely right on. But if you just remove it, it'll take too long. Like, if you just remove all the stuff the libertarians are right on, that has to go, it's not like you'll just see an explosion of growth. You have to give the stick to the carrot as well. You have to reward and punish at the same time. Punish those who don't want to do it. Like, maybe you give some good, say, I wouldn't say tax deferments, but say like, to the mining industry, you give them a 10-year grace period on taxes because it takes, anywhere from 7 to 11 years to get a mine to hit pay dirt, depending on what you're mining and where in the world you are. You could do the same thing for certain oil and gas. Like, if you do, but like the number one thing that Canada should specifically focus on is development of the energy sector so that it is domestic, so that our oil and gas doesn't have to go through the United States for us to get access to it, or for it to be refined. We refine 100% of what we need here. We use what oil we have. And that then you can bring down the price of everything because it's all domestic. You don't have to do all this shipping crap. Pipelines everywhere. I'm a big fan of pipelines. Love a good pipeline. And for electrical output, you're going to need to do nuclear. There's so many places in Canada you can put a fucking nuclear plant. And if something were to go wrong, it doesn't matter as bad. Like, there's an environmental impact, but it's not Chernobyl where you have fucking 50,000 people there that now need to be evacuated. And that's still quite... Nobody really lives there now. there's a lot of debate around whether or not that is like people actually don't need to live there. Um, but like very interesting studies have been done about the people in Pripyat that were exposed to the Chernobyl incidents. There is no significant increase to like the average person that was living there, versus a control population for cancers, for example. Very interesting studies that have been done that are same with um, like Fukushima and 3 Mile. Very interesting. Makes me wonder about the cause of cancer, certain cancers, and if you can actually increase it statistically significantly with exposure to radiation or that style of radiation, because like the the x-rays and gamma particles don't, their half-life is insanely fast because high energy doesn't like to stay high energy for very long. I don't know if you know that. But anyways, like you bring all those costs down and you cut the stupid taxes, you cut income taxes down, you cut corporate taxes down. There's a thing with taxes that taxation is a bell curve. So the highest point is closer to nothing than it is to say 10% in most scenarios. So in other words, you get more revenue with a lower tax rate than you would with a higher tax rate. And if you simplify the fucking tax code, you can really, really rake it in. And like, you'd have to bring down income taxes at the high end to less than 10% so that it becomes more expensive for rich people to pay a dude to do their taxes and hide all their money and do all this fancy shit than it is to just pay the tax. So, and eventually, once you get rid of the national debt, you get rid of income tax at all. You just completely swap over to tariffs, and you keep the corporate tax rate. I would, to be honest, I would put the corporate tax rate at just, like on the bell curve, on this side of the bell curve, just barely, because you're competing globally. You want to incentivize more businesses to invest in your country. So in doing that, like when you then assume that factor, you'd probably be making as much as the top of the bell curve, but you have more investment in your country, which is more robustness, which is very good. So yeah, like the national debt can be tackled. The problem is it's a multi-administration problem where you have to set up results within, for the Americans, it's like 3.5 years that you have to show good results, so that in that fourth year you've got like a booming economy and whatever, and then you can show the next administration, if you don't win, this is the path forward, keep doing what I've been doing. In Canada, you can, like, if you're getting good results and you're like in your fourth year and you've got very high approval rating, you can have a snap election, get another 5 years, and you can continue to do that cycle, make everybody fabulously wealthy. So Canada, it's much easier. Again, like America's got a problem because there's a whole, you have to deal with Senate, or the House and the Senate, where they are bought and paid for, and most of them will not stick their neck out for the American people. There's a few good ones, but In Canada, you don't actually need the fucking House or the Senate to pass a goddamn thing. If you win the Prime Minister, you can just do shit. Section 1, Section 33, and just the insane powers that the Prime Minister has collected over the years. So, like, that's great. I will leave you with this, though. The reason why the national debt needs to be tackled, for, like, in my mind, the most important reason. Like, if the government collapses and can't pay its debt, I don't care that much. Something will come out of it that will be fine. Chaos, short-term chaos, better result. Okay? The real problem is there is a wealth siphon effect from the creation of government debt. So what happens is government creates debt in the form of bonds. All right? As a bond purchaser, you get a percentage for holding on to it. So you are creating a safe and fairly liquid form of asset. All right? So if you are a bond holder, you get coupon payments on top of the percentage payment that you are going to receive at the end date of your bond. You're going to get all your money back plus some, and in the meantime, you're getting a coupon payment, depending on, again, the contract, think like twice a year. All right? And it's on, like, it's calculated on an annual basis, so, you know, you're getting, like, 2 payments of a 12th of the debt that's owed to you at a certain percentage. That's at a premium compared to the yield that you're getting. So, if you're, say, a bank, okay, and you need safe instruments to hold on to, well, you can just hold on to government debt. Like, people don't understand, like, when they say this is, well, what about the rate of inflation? It's a bank. Bank doesn't give a fuck about the rate of inflation. It's using other people's money to make money. Like, if you can go out there and get, as a bank, a loan of, you know, like, they get sweetheart deals. So, like, a 1% loan. Typically lower than that, but let's just say 1%. And, you know, the 5-year yield is at, like, 3%. You're pocketing 2%. That's how banks think. Because to them, purchasing power doesn't matter. Like, they need an asset that pays them back. So they're going to pick an asset and buy into it. And what that does is that disincentivizes the risk-taking that banks typically have had to do, which is lending into the real economy so that the real economy can expand and everybody can get wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. But if banks are gun-shy or have access to safe liquid assets such as government bonds, because a government bond is, well, they're going to run a deficit, so they're going to make more of them. It's liquid because, well, it's whatever currency it's denominated in, but more, because it's better, because it pays you a percentage. Like, it's money plus. It's fantastic. So, that's really why you want to take away from the government the national debt problem, because you're disincentivizing, you know, banks and like the typical bank you think of and the expanded definition of bank in the legal context, because that disincentivizes them from saying, hey, there's this guy who's got this cool new product and he wants to build a factory. Well, it's going to take him 2 years to build the damn thing, and then like another couple years to become the factory to become profitable, and like that's risky. I'm just gonna buy a 5-year bond and get my 3%, and pocket 2% spread. Like that's the bigger issue with the national debt. You limit the national debt, you limit that safety behavior, even with rehypothecation as a problem. Like you are forcing banks then to take risk and invest in your people, which is what needs to be done. So that's the video for today. I have no idea what I will do for the white pill video tomorrow. It is the 4th of July. You know, hopefully there's some really good news on the 4th of July. Yeah, we'll see what goes on. Until then, have a good day.